Hi, this is Ed Fitzpatrick. If you enjoy local politics as much as I do, be sure to join our friends at Rhode Island PBS for the show A Lively Experiment. Hosted by Jim Hummel, the weekly series features journalists, pundits, and politicians debating the stories and issues that matter most to us Rhode Islanders. Tune in to A Lively Experiment and be part of the conversation. Fridays at 7 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS and wherever you get your podcasts.
From the Boston Globe, this is Rhode Island Report. I'm Steph Machado, in for Ed Fitzpatrick. Welcome back to the podcast where we bring you big conversations from our very small state. Last week, the Rhode Island chapter of the American Federation of Teachers elected Maribeth Calabro as their new president. The largest teachers union in the state, it represents 12,000 members in school districts such as Providence, Cranston, Warwick, and Pawtucket. As the former head of the Providence Teachers Union, Calabro is known as a fierce defender of teachers, especially during the controversial state takeover of the school system. I spoke with her for an episode of Rhode Island PBS Weekly. This is an extended version of our conversation. So, Maribeth, you've just been elected president of the Rhode Island Federation of Teachers and Health Professionals, one of our major statewide teachers unions. What are some of your top priorities and plans at leading that union?
I have definitely have priorities legislatively. I think that in order to continue on in the vein that we have, we need to really think about having a charter cap in Rhode Island, particularly in the urbans, that mirrors Massachusetts. I think that we need to have a serious conversation about that. I think the funding formula is an absolute must to have a discussion about. It's not adequate. It's not equitable. It needs to serve all of its constituencies. And so funding formula is definitely another priority of ours. One of the other things is continuing on in looking at legislation to help support restoration or at least improvements to the retirement system.
You've been very critical of charter schools, mostly because of the way that they pull resources from traditional public schools.
Correct.
The money follows the student.
Correct.
You just had a charter school, though, the Paul Cuffey School.
Correct.
The teachers have voted to join the AFT.
Correct.
Will that change anything about your criticism of charters if they're now union members?
So if you look back, my criticisms have been of charters, but I specifically call out big box charters or education factories, as I like to refer to them. I have always been supportive of niche charter schools, particularly Youth Build and Noel Leadership Academy. I think both of those fulfill a need that we are unable to fill in public schools just because of the highly specialized nature of the services and support that they provide to their children or their students. So I'm not anti all charter schools, but I am anti big box charter school. One of my biggest concerns, or our biggest concerns with charters, is not necessarily that the money follows the child. It's that based on the funding formula and the way that the money follows the child, it does not cost the same amount of money to teach all children. So we get a per pupil expenditure, and that follows the child. But those students who do not hit the lottery, if you will, and get to go to the charter schools, who have differing abilities, who are multilingual learners, require a lot more services, a lot more supports.
Do you think this is a trend? We haven't seen a lot of unionized charter schools. Typically, part of the reason that they're not unionized is because they want to innovate and change.
So interestingly enough, and I don't know if you're aware of this, but charter schools the thought of charter schools were initiated by unions. They were going to create these innovation hubs or these zones of innovation where experimental, state-of-the-art, cutting edge, and research-based instructional practices could be developed and shared with the community schools, the Providence Public Schools, the Pawtucket, Central Falls, et cetera. In the communities that they're in, they're supposed to share ideas, they're supposed to share resources. That's not what happened when some of the charters became more industrialized, if you will, or more business model in their prospectus. I've heard from other people in other charters that they're interested in having that conversation. We welcome everyone, like our public school.
Would you welcome the teachers from Achievement First?
Sure.
Teachers union often have a really influential voice in elections. The AFT in the last governor's race split with the other teachers union, the NEA, and endorsed Nellie Gorbea over Dan McKee. What is your take on how Dan McKee is doing as governor when it comes to education?
I don't think he's doing well. I don't think he's doing right by the students and families of our city or our state. He doesn't understand what the needs of individual schools are, but particularly urban schools. And I think that he's put all of his eggs in the basket of the 365 that he talks about and he's promoting, and the after school programs and stuff, which are all fantastic, but we need support day in and day out from morning till early evening for our students in a way that is not just after school programs, right? They need food. Our students have housing insecurity, they have food insecurity, housing instability. Their families struggle with trying to get and maintain jobs. That should be part of the focus of funding schools. And I also think that the governor didn't know enough about education to actually impart any kind of effectuated change on schools and school systems within the state.
Very, very early to talk about 2026, but right now his main challenger appears to be Helena Foulkes. Do you have any thoughts on her?
I've met with Helena. I've had conversations with Helena pre-last election. So I think that she is not nuanced enough in talking about assessments, but I do think that she has some really good ideas, really solid ideas about education in Providence, urbans, and particularly the state at large.
You were leaving your job as a special educator at Nathaniel Green Middle School, where you've been for 30 years. Could you reflect for me on how the district has changed from when you started to now?
Oh, yeah. Well, I tell the new teachers in my building I'm older than the furniture. It's changed a lot, and it's changed a lot of different times, right? So over the years, we've gone through different edifications of curriculum products. We've been through, I can't tell you how many superintendents I've been through, but it's been a few. And each one of them brings their own brand of leadership and educational focus. I would say that the thing that's been most consistent is our students and our staff. So our teachers, we saw through COVID and now through this crazy internet hack debacle, whatever we're calling it, our teachers' ability to pivot, to be resilient, and to do whatever it takes to be in the best for the best interest of the children is what they do. I say this all the time, and I will say it probably till the day I die. Providence teachers are some of the best teachers in the country, regardless of whether or not the test scores show that. When you see kids coming in every day, running up to their teacher, hugging them, and having relationships with families and being invited to quinces, going to baseball games and developing these interpersonal relationships to support our students, that speaks volumes to the character and the dedication of our teachers. I've seen some really amazing teachers get burnt out recently, partially due to the takeover and partially due to the effects of COVID, if you will.
Demographic shifts too, right? I mean,
absolutely.
The needs of the kids more.
The needs have changed a great deal. The demographics have changed. We're seeing a lot more multi-language learners than we've ever seen before. And not just Spanish speakers, right? We're seeing people who are from Cambodia, from Vietnam, from Afghanistan. It's one thing for a student to come in who is multilingual and come in at kindergarten, first, second grade. You know, that's the foundation, so you can build slowly. But when they come into middle school and the high school, they've already established certain belief systems in their head or have some nuanced foundational skills, and you have to see if the skills are accurate. If they're not accurate, then you have to reteach, and it requires a lot of teachers. There's a lot that goes on in the planning of lessons and educating our students.
We'll be back with Maribeth Calabro after a quick break.
When you want to go beyond the headlines, let me recommend Rhode Island PBS Weekly. Rhode Island PBS Weekly is an award-winning news magazine broadcast that gives you the full story, powered by investigative journalism and narrative storytelling. New episodes of Rhode Island PBS Weekly drop Sundays at 7:30 p.m. on Rhode Island PBS. Watch past episodes at ripbs.org/weekly. That's ripbs.org/weekly.
So for the past 5 years, and you've been Providence Teachers Union president for all that time, the district has been under a state takeover. Are the Providence schools better or worse today than they were 5 years ago?
They're different. Are they better? I would say in some instances, maybe. I think that we're better at identifying the social emotional needs of our students. Teachers are trying to be more engaged with the parents and the families to which they serve. There have been some good changes. I think that Dr. Montañez being made superintendent was a good change. Some of the things that are not great are the amount of folks that we've lost, both at the district level and at the school level. The amount of
teachers leaving the district?
Teachers leaving, principals leaving, admin staff. I wish that there were more opportunities for collaboration in terms of talking to teachers and bringing teachers in when we have conversations about what's working and what's not working.
If you had to characterize how the state takeover is going so far, what would you say?
It's bumpy. I think we've had fits and starts. We can always do better. The union can do better. Teachers could do better. Students could do better. Admin could do better. The takeover could have done better. But here we are. And I think it's important that we capitalize on the things that are working and continue to push forward and be able to return our schools to local control so that we can have some ownership of what we're doing. Because I don't feel like teachers feel like they have any ownership of what they're teaching every day.
Do you think the state should never have taken over the school district?
I think that the takeover was a political move by many people in order to enhance and elevate the political profile of then Governor Raimondo and the mayor. You know, we had people who were sitting on the Hopkins report, and so we know what that was about. And the focus was only on teachers and the contract.
And yeah, that was this huge impetus for why the state took over the school district. They said, we have the legal authority to blow up the contract.
Mm-hmm. They thought they did.
They thought they did. You disagreed.
I do.
The mayor at the time willingly gave over control of the schools, saying that he thought that the state had the authority to blow up the contract. That never happened.
He wished.
You had very contentious contract negotiations
Correct.
with Commissioner Infante Green, but the contract was not blown up. So,
No.
I mean, did you win that fight?
I think we were able to show that it wasn't the contract that was the problem. We have the same contract as everybody else has.
In light of the fact that we're under a state takeover, how important do you think the November 5th school board election is? It's the first one in many, many decades where Providence voters can pick some members of the school board. Do you think this is very consequential? Or
I absolutely think it's consequential.
You do?
I do. If you look at the state as a whole, Providence and Central Falls are the only two districts that don't have an elected school board or some semblance of an elected school board. So I do think it's consequential. When you have mayoral appointees or gubernatorial appointees, there's no distinction between the single mindset of the leader and the appointees. That's not what we need. We need people in those positions who are not beholden to a government person, but who may be supported by the public who has voted for them, so that they can think and act independently.
What was your take on the RICAS scores that came out in October? Statewide, English language arts scores were down, math statistically flat. I think there was thoughts that maybe we were in an upward trend, but that's not what we saw.
You know, I have very strong feelings about RICAS and assessments, but it's one moment in time. It's a snapshot, and I don't think it tells us everything that we need to know about our individual students. I'm not one to blame COVID for everything, but we are teaching different children right now. The children that were impacted by COVID are not the same children that we used to teach. The level and degree of social emotional issues that they're having, loneliness, depression, anxiety, acting out, behavioral needs, is nothing like we've ever seen before. And not just in Providence, it's across the state. Any teacher that you talk to will tell you that things are significantly and markedly different post-COVID as they were pre-COVID.
So you don't seem to hold a lot of stock in the RICAS scores.
I don't know how much stock you can take in an assessment that has not been normed on urban and urban ring students, or how much stock you can take in an assessment that requires students to sit in a room quietly for hours at a time, reading things that are not related to them at all. Now, that's not to say that we don't have work to do, because we do have work to do. We have a lot of work to do. But I think that if we move to more of a portfolio assessment type of review of our students and what they know and are able to do, I think that you're going to see far more success than we see now.
Proponents of standardized testing would say it sort of gives this way to compare across districts. And we even adopted the same test as Massachusetts, so we could even more accurately compare to Massachusetts. Because every district is going to have different grading standards. Without a test like the RICAS, how else do you compare across districts?
The RICAS could be a component of, but I think it should be more of a holistic look at our students. One size fits all doesn't work in terms of instruction, because each one of our students is individually unique in terms of the way that they learn, how they learn, and what they bring to the table, whether they have background knowledge, whether they've had support as early intervention, any one of those things. That test doesn't measure other things. It literally measures what it's intended to measure, which is the curriculum products that we're using. And so we have to think about, if our students aren't making gains the way that people expect them to, then maybe we should take a deeper, harder look at what the curriculum is that we're using.
I want to ask you about your take on the Providence financial crisis.
Yeah.
School officials say that they're going to run out of money in a few months. They are proposing a wide list of cuts, from sports to RIPTA bus passes to non-union staff cuts. If they don't get millions more.
10.2 million?
The 10.9 last I checked. But yeah, on the city side, the mayor argues, why did you craft a budget based on a city appropriation we were never going to give you? And this is in court. The two sides are in court over the interpretation of how much the city owes. But what do you make of this position that the district is in right now?
We're in trouble. We're in big trouble. And whenever the powers that be get to this point where we're in court and we're arguing and we're pointing fingers and we're doing all those things, the people who are suffering are going to be our students. Sports is on the table. Sports allows, I'm sure you saw our students speak very eloquently and passionately in front of the school board, that sports is what brings them to school on a regular basis, that sports is what keeps them focused in class so that they can get the grades that they need to get in order to stay on the team. Plus, it's an outlet for them. So they're not, doing nothing in on the phones and on social media. That's a big deal. Cutting staff, we're at bare bones as it is. This is literally a fiscal DEFCON 1. And not being able to pay their bills means a lot. It means not being able to turn the heat on. It means making concessions in contracts, food contracts, the cleaning contracts. It means a lot of different things. The difference between walking to school 1 mile and 2 miles in a city in the winter, it's insane to think about.
Do you think the city should put more money in? Do you think the state should put more money in?
I think everybody needs to sit down at the table, bring their receipts. The mayor wants an audit, give them the audit. Fine, you can have an audit. At the end of the day, what does it matter what the audit says? We still don't have the money. So what are we going to do about it? And they need to be grown-ups, come to the table and say, I'll give you 10 million if the state kicks in 10 million. I'll give you 7 million if the state kicks in 7 million. Going forward after that, if they want to check receipts, they want checks and balances, fine. But we can't go backwards. The money's gone. It's already been spent. So I don't know what looking at a budget would do or looking at an audit would do, except to reassure people that the money's not there anymore. Let's agree that the money's not there. We can look at the budget later. But for right now, in the end of October, when you're talking about not being able to pay bills in January, adversely impacting our students, kids can't play basketball. They can't play softball. They can't play baseball. That could impact their scholarships to go to college. Do we want to do that to our kids? It's going to be a lost opportunity for them. So can we stop pointing fingers and name calling and he said, she said, they did, I didn't, I paid, she didn't pay. I don't care. And I don't think our kids care either. Pay up and we'll figure it out later.
Maribeth Calabro, thank you so much for the time.
Thank you.
You can watch a version of this interview in the latest episode of Rhode Island PBS Weekly at ripbs.org/weekly. Rhode Island Report is a production of the Boston Globe in collaboration with Rhode Island PBS. Today's episode was produced by Megan Hall. Audio mixing and mastering by Marissa Ewing of Hemlock Creek Productions. Our music is from APM. Be sure to follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. I'm Steph Machado. Ed and I will be back on Wednesday with Jim Hummel of Rhode Island PBS for our debrief of the election.
Looking to binge watch all your favorite PBS shows? You need Rhode Island PBS Passport. Masterpiece, Antiques Roadshow, Rhode Island PBS Weekly, and many more. Watch them all, anytime, and from any streaming device. Learn more about this member benefit at ripbs.org/passport. That's ripbs.org/passport.